The jollof steamed in the crystal bowl, red and glossy with roasted peppers, studded with soft goat meat and bay leaves that Amara had tied with string so she could pull them out later. The plantains were golden and sweet, edges curled like smiles. She had set the table the way he liked it: white plates, gold forks, chilled glass for water, linen napkins folded into fans. The penthouse windows stretched from floor to ceiling, holding the whole city of Lagos like a photograph. Bridges threading the lagoon, boats pushing thin wakes, and, far off, a bruise of storm gathering over the ocean. Darius walked in with his phone still glued to his ear. The smooth gray of his suit, a perfect match to the walls. Even in the soft light, the diamond on his watch winked. He dropped into his chair at the head of the long table, ending the call with a swipe like he was cutting something. He did not look at the food. He looked at Amara's hand. A smear of palm oil glowed near her knuckle. He raised a brow. "What is this?" His voice was flat. "Palm oil from the stew," she said. "I'll wash it off." She was nervous. She always got clumsy when he watched her. She wasn't always this way. There had been a time when her laugh filled rooms, and her hands never shook. Tonight, she forced a smile and set the bowl down in front of him, the way her mother taught, 2 hands, respectful. Because even when people have money, they are still human and deserve care. Darius did not reach for the spoon. He looked at the food like it was news he didn't trust. "You called this jollof?" Amara felt the first sting crawl up her neck. "Yes, I tasted it. It's good." He set down his phone with a careful clack. "You tasted it." "Yes, you tasted it." He said it like it was a confession. Amara's eyes flicked to the far end of the room where a flower arrangement waited for guests who wouldn't come. Earlier that day, he had said there would be visitors. A quick stop by, he'd called it. Maybe a partner from New York. Maybe someone from the board. He did not tell her who. He liked to keep her adjusting. If she asked questions, he would say, "Do I ask you how you season your stew? Then why do you ask me about business?" He was a billionaire who built towers in 3 cities and could break a deal with a smile. He was also a man who could break silence with the same ease and leave his wife standing in rooms with her thoughts. "Eat," she said softly, sliding a plate toward him. "You've had a long day." He lifted the spoon finally, as if humoring a child. He took a mouthful. He did not swallow. He turned his head, and in one smooth motion, he spat, right onto her hands, right onto the floor between them, the red of the stew shocking against the marble. The sound was louder than it should have been. It slapped the air. Amara didn't move. The world took one step back. She blinked. The smear on her knuckles spread, bright and wet. The spoon clattered against the bowl as he dropped it. "Do you call this food?" he asked. "Did they not teach you how to cook where you come from? Or are you too busy playing the perfect wife for your village aunties to notice that men of my level don't eat this street mess?" The pain rose, not from the insult, but from the way he said, "Where you come from," like her roots were a stain. Amara opened her mouth, then closed it. The AC hummed. Somewhere below, a car alarm barked twice and died. She bent slowly and wiped the floor with a napkin. She could hear her mother's voice in her bones. "Do not quarrel in front of a man who loves a crowd. His audience is his armor." But they were alone, weren't they? She pressed the napkin down. Her breath held. When she stood, her hands shook more than she wanted them to. Darius was watching her, a faint smile on his mouth that never touched his eyes. "Look at you," he said, amusement curling in his tone. "The perfect little cleaner. That's what you're good at." He leaned back. Don't worry. There are women who know how to cook for this kind of life." She stared at him then, hard enough to see past the smooth skin, the dimple, the barber's sharp line at his temple. She tried to find the boy she once met at a pitch event in Atlanta, a hungry dreamer with a cheap tie and a laptop full of blueprints. He had asked her for directions to the conference room because he was late. She had been a volunteer then, an architecture student doing her internship, wearing a badge and carrying a stack of programs. He had made her laugh. He had told her Lagos would be their playground. He had said, "I don't want to build without you." Back then, he could apologize. Back then, he could say, "I'm tired," and she would tease him into a smile. Back then, he did not spit. She took the bowl and turned to the kitchen island because her body needed something to do that wasn't crying. "I'll make something else." He checked his phone again. "Don't bother." The storm outside pressed a palm to the glass. The first drops hit the window like small stones. Amara rinsed her hands under the tap. The water ran pink, then clear. Her mind ran to the staff. Eve, the cook who left at 4 to catch the Danfo. Celestine, the housekeeper who sent money to her sister in Benin. Malik, the driver who kept quiet more than he spoke. None of them were here at this hour. She was alone with him and the echoes. But they were not alone. They were not alone. It began weeks back, with whispers in Darius's office elevator. A story about how his board wanted to see the marriage picture. Investors liked stability. News blogs liked love. There were rumors that a certain matriarch he courted in a new deal did not trust men who couldn't be gentle in private. "She believes how a man treats his wife is how he treats a city," one assistant had said, thinking Amara was out of earshot. Amara had smiled then and tucked that sentence away. She didn't know when it would return. She also didn't know about the small black dome in the corner of the dining room, thick as a mango, tucked into the crown molding. She had seen it before, of course, when the security team installed the new system after Darius's name trended for 2 days over a hostile bid. She had walked past it 100 times. Tonight, its tiny red eye watched, unblinking. Tonight, its view was not just for security. "Wipe your face," Darius said, already half turned away. "You look messy." Messy. He had told her that when she cried after a charity gala last month, when he joked at the table about village girls and city furniture. He had told her that when she wore her hair in thick twists instead of the silk straight he preferred. He had told her that when she tried to bring her father to their home, the father who fixed radios in Enugu and smiled with a mouth full of gaps and stories. "Messy," Darius had said, like a sentence. He liked clean lines. He liked silence that obeyed. She dabbed at her face, though she hadn't realized a tear had fallen. The napkin came away wet, anyway. "Why are you angry?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "Is it the deal in Victoria Island? You haven't slept." He inhaled, the smile leaving. "Do you think every bad mood is about business? Do you think I am a cartoon character with one problem?" He gestured lazily at the table. "Sometimes I am simply unimpressed. It's food. It's more than food." He stood and walked to the windows, looking down, hands in pockets. "It's presentation, it's taste, it's understanding where you live now." He turned his head, his profile lit by lightning. "You serve me like we are in some backyard, and you expect me to pretend?" He laughed softly, the laugh he used when he killed a deal without raising his voice. "I am Darius Cole." She looked at his back and remembered the day they drove to his mother's church in Atlanta for a Thanksgiving fundraiser. His mother had held Amara's hands and said, Look at how he shines more with you beside him." The choir had sung an old hymn. After, as they loaded boxes of canned food into the trunk, Darius had stolen a kiss and whispered, "You are my home." It was not a lie then. Or if it was a beautiful one, the kind both of them wanted to believe. She placed the bowl on the island and reached for the sink again, even though her hands were clean. The water was the only sound she could control. Somewhere behind her, a footstep clicked. "Sir?" A voice, soft. "Madam." Amara flinched. She hadn't heard the private elevator open. She turned. A woman stood near the side door, late 50s, wrapped in an aso-oke shawl that glowed like evening fire. Her gila was small and neat, like a crown that didn't need to announce itself. She wore flat shoes that made no sound, and a ring that caught the lightning for a second and held it. Darius stiffened. "You're early," he said, the smoothness back too quick, like a coat thrown over a stain. "We weren't expecting—" The woman lifted a hand. "You weren't expecting me," she said, voice calm. "I know." She moved closer, her eyes taking in the room, the napkin on the floor, the way Amara stood with her hands in water like she was trying to rinse something she couldn't name. The woman's face did not change, but the air did, as if the apartment recognized an owner it had not known it had. Amara felt a strange pull of memory. She had seen this woman's portrait in Business Day once, Folake Adeyemi, the quiet force behind coastal developments, the matriarch of a holding company that made banks bow and politicians clear their throats. People said she never took meetings after sunset. People said she always wore flat shoes because she preferred to stand for a long time and watch before she spoke. Darius recovered fast. He smiled, stepping forward, hands open. "Auntie Folake," he said, using that Nigerian way of covering respect and strategy in one word. "It's good to see you. You must forgive the domestic scene. My wife is trying out new recipes." He laughed, warm and easy now, a man with nothing to hide. "We were just silent," Folake said, not loud, but the word cut. "Let me decide what we were just." Amara's fingers tightened on the sink edge. She made herself breathe. When she looked toward the black dome in the ceiling, she realized for the first time that a thin wire tucked into the molding ran toward the corner that led to Darius's private study, where the new conference system sat, where the screen could pull faces from New York and London and anywhere. She looked back at the woman. Folake's eyes were old and bright, like the eyes of someone who had watched storms and decided which trees to replant. Darius chuckled again, too high this time. "Of course," he said. "You always call it like you see it." He turned his head slightly, seeking the angle that hid the red smear drying near the table leg. "You know how it is. Long days. Stress. We laugh about it later." He reached for Amara's shoulder with the kindness he wore for photographs. "Amara, say hello." Amara stepped away from the sink. Her voice was steady. "Thank God." "Good evening, Ma." "Good evening, my daughter," Folake said, and in the old way she added, "May you not cry in your father's house and then cry again in your husband's." Then, so simple it almost tripped, she asked, "Are you okay?" It was the kind of question that breaks you because it is soft. Amara swallowed. Her eyes burned, but she kept her chin high. "I'm fine," she said, because in this room that word was armor. Folake looked at her for 2 long heartbeats, reading the truth under the lie like a tailor reading fabric grain. Then she turned to Darius. "You spat," she said, as if stating the weather. "On your wife." Darius's smile cracked. I watched. Folake pointed, not at the dome, but at the small bronze figurine on the sideboard. A fisherman in a canoe. Amara had always liked it. It looked peaceful. She had not known the tiny black bead in its eye was a lens. Folaka glanced toward the study. The system called me when your team powered it for our meeting. My flight came early. I thought I would sit in your office and see if you were home. I saw. Thunder rolled, far and close, at once. Darius's expression trying to be a cloud that could skip rain. Auntie, let's not be dramatic. You spat, Folake repeated, the softness gone. She stepped closer, very calm. A man can be hungry. A man can be tired. A man can be foolish in private. She gestured to the room. But a man who spits at kindness under his own roof, what will that man pour on a city he does not love? Mud. That is what. She looked at Amara again, and her eyes softened. My daughter, go and sit. Amara's body obeyed before her mind did. She moved to a chair but did not sit fully, hovering like she expected the seat to vanish. Darius laughed again, but the laugh was brittle now, like ice that had been walked on too many times. Folake, with respect, this is my home. You are a partner, not my mother. Do not mistake your power in one place for power in all places. Folak tilted her head, considering him like a scientist looks at flame. In my life, I have watched 3 men fall from towers they built, she said. One because he believed numbers more than people. One because he believed flattery more than truth. One because he believed himself more than God. Which one are you, Darius? He did not answer. He pulled his shoulders back, squaring them like he did before he signed. We have a meeting, he said. If you came to discuss contracts, let us discuss contracts. If you came to discuss my marriage, we do not have that meeting. Not today, not ever. Folaka smiled then, a small thing that made the room feel even more dangerous. You think I came to sign a contract, she said. I came to weigh a man. Amara felt the air shift again, like a boat turning to face a different wind. She realized with a sudden clarity that her life had narrowed so slowly she hadn't noticed the edges closing. She had given up a project in Surulere because Darius said the commute made her tired. She had given up breakfasts with her sister because Darius scheduled last-minute calls. She had given up wearing yellow because Darius said the color shouted louder than she should. She had become quiet, so a loud man could feel larger. The realization scared her, but it also did something else. For the first time in months, it made her angry in a clean way, the way rain can make dust lift and disappear. Folake slid one palm across the table, pausing near the napkin, then lifting her hand. This is what you did to your home, she told Darius, and you expect me to trust you with 10 new hectares of land, where families will live and grow and eat. No! Thunder pressed closer. A flash lit the room. Somewhere, a door opened. The private elevator again. A breath of cold air slipped in, and with it, another figure, slim, in a navy raincoat beaded with drops. He carried a leather portfolio under his arm. He was young, maybe 30, and his face was familiar in the way faces are when you've seen them on business magazine covers and in interviews where they talk about the next big thing, with a mix of awe and caution. Darius turned, relief flashing fast. An ally. Kenzo, he said, you made it. The young man didn't smile. He looked at Folak first and nodded. Ma. She nodded back. You're on time, she said. Good. Kenzo's eyes moved to Amara. He paused. His mouth tightened. He stepped closer to the table and set the portfolio down. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. I saw the last 5 minutes, he said. I was in the car downstairs. Security streamed the feed to prep the call. I thought it was a test. Darius's jaw ticked. It was not a test, he said. Kenzo's gaze didn't leave Amara. But it is an answer. To what? Amara wanted to ask. She felt the smallest tremor in her fingers again and tucked them into her lap. Folaka drew out a chair at the end of the table and sat. The movement was simple, but even the chair seemed to obey her. "We will not have our meeting tonight," she said. "We will have a different kind of conversation." She lifted her chin toward the ceiling dome. "And we will make sure the people who need to see what I saw, see it." Darius stepped forward, anger finally showing under the polish. "If you threaten me in my house—" Folak chuckled, not unkind. "Who said anything about threats? I am old. I believe in light. When light enters a room, roaches run. That is all." Kenzo opened his portfolio, slid a document forward. "There's also this," he said softly. "The audit we discussed. The one you said was noise." He did not look at Darius when he said it. He looked at Amara. And in that look was something like apology for being part of a world that asked women to clean up messes they never made. The storm broke then. Rain hammered the glass. The room filled with the soft roar of it. Amara exhaled and felt her shoulders lower by a breath she hadn't known she held since morning. Darius reached for the paper. His fingers paused above it. The diamond on his watch winked again, but it looked duller now. "You come into my home," he said, each word slow. "And you think you can rewrite how this house works. You think you can judge me. You think you can." "What we think," Folak said, and the softness returned to her voice, like balm turned to blade and back. "Is that a man who spits at love will eventually drown in his own contempt." She stood, small under the window but large in the room. "We will talk tomorrow about the land. Tonight, you will talk to your wife." Amara almost laughed at the word talk. She pictured all the previous talks they had had, monologues dressed as dialogue. But Folak's eyes told her something else. They said, "You are not invisible in this house. Not tonight. Maybe not again." Darius's face hardened. The city lights turned the rain into glitter. The AC clicked off, and the sound of water grew louder. He lifted his chin and aimed his anger where it always landed safest. "At least take this back to the kitchen," he said coldly, pushing the bowl of jollof with one finger as if it might stain him again. "If anyone is still hungry." Folak's hand shot out and covered the bowl like a mother slapping a hot pot from a child's reach. She did it without looking away from Darius, eyes locked, battle quiet and old. Her fingers rested on the warm rim. Kenzo's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, then at the ceiling. He raised his brows. "Ma," he said, "they're all on. The call started early. New York, Abuja, the ones you asked. They can see and hear." Darius blinked. "What?" He looked toward the study, where the glass door reflected his face, and then, as if the room itself stepped aside, showed a screen waking in swirls of light. Small squares appeared, one by one, like windows in a night building, faces pulling into focus across 3 time zones. Amara turned slowly. She saw the wall of strangers watching as if a stage curtain had lifted. She saw a woman with gray braids lean forward. She saw a man in a navy suit and a red tie frown. She saw a younger face she recognized from a news story last month about a fund that promised to build clinics where none existed. She saw her own reflection in the glass, eyes wide, jaw tight. A point of red on her wrist where the steam had kissed earlier. Folak did not move her hand from the bowl. "They asked to meet the man behind the proposal, and the woman behind the man," she said simply. "So here we are." Darius swore under his breath, the word sharp and small. "End the call." "I can't," Kenzo said, but his tone said wouldn't. He looked at Amara again with that same apology, and something more. Respect, maybe. They saw enough. They'll want to hear from her. From who? Darius snapped, though he knew. Amara felt the room tilt and settle, as if a ship had turned and found a new heading. She looked at Folake. The older woman's face was a calm sea. She looked at Kenzo. He nodded once, a small, "You can." She looked at the glass with its patchwork of faces. She looked at her husband, who had spat at her and laughed, who never expected a stage where he did not hold the mic. Her hands stopped shaking. She placed them on the back of the chair and held on. A voice came through the speaker, clear despite the rain. Older, American, rich with Southern rhythm. "Mrs. Cole," it said, "we didn't plan to speak with you tonight, but since we're all here—" The voice paused. "Would you tell us what kind of home your husband is asking us to invest in? Because from what we just watched, we are not sure we should invest in him." The room went still, and the storm pressed its face against the glass like a child. Amara opened her mouth to answer, and the private elevator chimed again. The doors slid apart. A small figure in a yellow raincoat stepped out, hood down, face tilted up, drops in her eyelashes. She looked from Amara to Darius to the bowl under Folake's hand. She looked like a secret walking into light. She looked like an answer and a question all at once. "Mom," the girl said, voice tiny and clean, "why did Daddy spit on you?" The call went silent. Folake's hand tightened on the bowl. Darius closed his eyes for one heartbeat, then opened them like a man who has been caught not just by the law, but by truth. And Amara, with the whole city watching, had to decide what to say, because the little girl in the doorway was not their daughter. She was the child Amara didn't know existed. The girl's hood dripped a small circle on the marble, a bright yellow puddle blooming at her feet. She stood as if she had walked into the wrong movie, eyes wide and steady. The kind of steady that only comes from a child who has learned to mop up adult weather with her small hands. She was maybe 6, maybe 7, with skin the color of soft cocoa, and a head of tight coils pulled into 2 puffs that had come loose in the rain. A tiny birthmark, like a comma, sat near her left eye. She clutched a faded backpack with a cartoon astronaut on it. The astronaut smiled even as the storm pressed itself against the windows. Darius moved first, not toward the girl, but toward the control panel on the wall. He stabbed at a button. The glass door to the study slid shut, muffling the screens of faces, but not erasing them. Through the transparency, they were still there, squares like lit windows, watching. "Who brought you up?" he asked, voice low and dangerous at the edges. The girl blinked. "The man in the lobby," she said. "He knows my name." Folake's attention flicked toward the private elevator console. A green light blinked steady, a sign that someone had used a resident authorization. She did not move her hand from the bowl, as if it were an altar to gravity. Amara's throat tightened and loosened in one breath. She registered 3 facts at once. The child had called her mom. The child had asked why Daddy spit. The child was a stranger. Beneath those facts, old instincts stirred, the same ones that made her reach for a falling glass or lift a hand before a door closed on a person's fingers. She crouched to the girl's level, knees popping softly. "What's your name?" Amara asked, because names are fences and keys all at once. "Ivy," the girl said, proud like all children when they say the word that means them. "I'm 6. I'll be 7 in December. Ms. Rose says I'm good at reading." "Hi, Ivy," Amara said, keeping her voice level, not looking up at Darius because, if she did, she might see a truth that would knock her sideways. "Where is your mother?" The girl's gaze wavered toward the hallway, as if a mother might appear, then returned to Amara's face. "She's downstairs," Ivy said. "She said I should say hello first, because my hair is a mess, and she needed the bathroom, and also because she didn't want to cry in front of the flowers." Ivy's eyes slid to the arrangement at the end of the room, the one set for guests who weren't supposed to become witnesses. "She said rich people flowers are too pretty to cry on." Kenzo's hand hovered near the portfolio, knuckles pale. He looked briefly at Darius, then at Amara, then at Folake. He was a man who had walked into boardrooms with sharks and kept his hands, but he looked, in that moment, like he had wandered into a family's locked cupboard. Darius exhaled through his nose like a bull called into a ring. "You shouldn't be here," he said to the girl, dead of warmth. "You can't just come." Ivy tilted her head. "But the man said I can. He said, 'Welcome home.' He gave me a biscuit." Folake's mouth softened at the edges. "What did the man look like?" she asked. "He is fat," Ivy said cheerfully, holding her hands out to show a roundness. "He wears glasses that slide. He has a gap tooth that whistles when he talks." She whistled a perfect tiny note. "He said I am tall." "Samuel," Amara murmured automatically, picturing the concierge's kind face. He loved children. He kept sweets. He teased Amara about not wearing enough yellow and made sure the drivers got plates at Christmas. Samuel knew who Ivy was, enough to send her up. Amara stood slowly, the room slightly taller than it ought to be. She felt the rake of betrayal across her ribs without yet pulling out the blade to look. She turned to Darius. He was watching Ivy as if she were a bomb with a laugh painted on its face. "Who is she?" Amara asked. The words plain, the floor steady. Darius didn't answer. "Who is she?" Amara asked again, louder. The storm chewed at the glass, impatient for a sound it could compete with. Darius's jaw worked. He looked toward the study's glass panel where faces hovered like a jury, toward Folake's hand on the bowl as if she ran the court, toward Kenzo, whose neutrality had drained away, leaving a young man who had chosen sides, even if he hadn't said so aloud. Finally, Darius returned to Amara, and, in that returning, his eyes ricocheted off hers like a stone skipping and then sinking. "Amara," he said, voice made of apologies he did not intend to finish. "I can explain." Ivy's small voice threaded between them. "It's okay, Daddy," she said, trying to help. "I told Ms. Rose I wanted to see where you live. She said maybe today you would smile and say the thing you say on the phone. You know, 'Sweetheart, I'm in a meeting.'" Ivy tried the tone. Lower, serious, adorable. "I like it." The silence that followed was thick as Gary before water. In it, Amara heard the sound of her own life cracking along hairline fractures she had ignored. She had noticed the late nights with no shadows of work on his face. She had noticed the second phone that lived in his jacket, like a caged bird. She had noticed the scent of a perfume she didn't own on his cuffs, sweet and stubborn, a story she never asked to be told. She had noticed, and she had explained it away, because people told her marriages of men with money had two atmospheres, the public and the private, and a wife survived by breathing through both. She had been a good diver. Now her lungs burned. "Bring her mother up," Folake said, voice gentle but steel-lined. "If there is a flood, we do not ask the cup why it is wet. We ask the river how it overflowed." Kenzo slid his phone from his pocket and texted with quick thumbs. He did not look up while he wrote, as if seeing faces would make his hands dishonor him. Then he nodded. "They're coming," he said. Darius turned on him. You don't make calls in my house, he snapped. Kenzo met his eyes, unblinking. You made a broadcast in mine, he said quietly, nodding toward the study. I'm just returning the favor. The private elevator chimed again. Such a small, cheerful sound for such a dangerous door. Samuel stepped out first, apologetic lines already carved into his forehead. Madam, Olga, he began, addressing both, hands wringing his cap. Please, It's okay, Samuel, Amara said. You didn't do wrong. The words surprised her with their calm. Maybe they came from the place inside her that had already gone beyond the shock, to the shore where women gather broken things and build rafts. Behind Samuel, a woman stepped into view. She was in her early 30s, wearing a simple Ankara dress beneath a thin raincoat. The pattern, red hibiscus, had bled a little in the downpour, but it still caught the light like small suns. She was pretty in the kind of way boys in secondary school write poems about, and then pretend they didn't. Her eyes were swollen, not from rain. She took 2 steps in and stopped, regarding the room as one regards a cliff after a long walk. Rose, Darius said. Warning threaded through the syllable-like wire. She flinched at his voice, but kept moving. She knelt to help Ivy tug her hood back, fingers gentle. We don't run ahead, she murmured into the child's hair, a scold that was also a prayer. Then she straightened, squared her shoulders the way market women do before they haggle with a rude customer, and looked at Amara. I didn't want to come up, she said, voice rough with spent crying and a Nigerian lilt that had been softened by time in America. I wanted to send a message and go. But she nodded toward Ivy. She said she has a right to know where she came from and where she didn't. Children say things like that when you try to hide them from weather. Her mouth pulled, not unkindly. I was tired of umbrellas. Who are you to be in my house? Darius asked, as if authority could change the meaning of my. Rose's head turned, slow, like a sunflower tracking a different sun. Your house? She repeated softly, as if tasting the words before deciding where to spit or swallow. You didn't ask that when you came to mine. Foleki removed her hand from the bowl at last and folded her fingers before her like a woman who could bless or curse, and chose, for the moment, to wait. Speak, she told Rose. You came with story. Take breath and give it. Rose's eyes flicked to Amara again, as if asking permission. Amara nodded, not trusting her own voice. In that nod, some small bridge formed between the 2 women. Different lives, same river. Rose inhaled. I met him in Atlanta, she began, and the map of the past unfolded onto the room's cold floor. I was waiting tables and studying nights. He came in with suits and laughter and talked about building cities like they were Lego. He tipped heavy and came back to sit. And one day, he came back alone. She glanced at Darius. You wore that gray suit. The same one, I think. You said you liked my mind, not just my face. I wanted to believe it. Women like me want to believe we are visible beyond the curve of our mouths. Kenzo's gaze dropped, potentially to hide a wince. Amara did not blink. Rose continued. It was a few months. It was weekends and messages and one vacation that felt like a movie, because it was. He said it couldn't be public because investors were watching and Nigerians talk. He said he was complicated. He said he was not like other men, even while doing what other men do. When I found out I was pregnant, he froze. Then he said he would take care of the child, but we had to be strategic. He liked that word. He liked words that made him sound like a plan. She smiled, small and tired. I said no at first. I wanted more than money. But life is a long road with short food stops. When the baby came and the rent went high and my mother got sick, I called him. He answered on the second ring and had money on Cash App before we finished fighting. Darius's spine had straightened as the story picked its way through time, like a man bracing against a wind he could not see. I have always provided, he said sharply, not to boast, but as if reciting a defense he had practiced. There was an agreement. Rose's laugh was paper thin. There was not an agreement. There were instructions. Don't call after 10. Don't show up where I am. Don't tell her. She looked at Amara. He said her like a job title. Don't tell the wife. He said it so many times I started to think wife was a company with a logo and a slogan and uniforms. She shifted the backpack on Ivy's shoulder. He asked to see Ivy sometimes. He'd take her for ice cream. He cried once when she fell and cut her knee. I thought maybe there was room for the kind of man I needed him to be. Then tonight, she saw his name on TV, something about a new project, and she asked, "Does Daddy build houses for people who spit?" Rose's mouth trembled. I didn't know what she meant. She said she heard him shouting when he called me by mistake. He butt dials sometimes. And she heard a woman's voice. I realized the phone had opened one window and left another closed. I realized I was tired of half rooms. She lifted her chin. So I came. Amara stood very still, as if any movement might tumble the tower of hurt she held at careful angles inside. She thought of the quiet ways Darius had trained their days. She thought of the lonely meals on nights he was at the site. She thought of the empty phrase, "Don't embarrass me." He threw like a leash. Above it all, she thought of the child in yellow rain and the comma at her eye that looked like a mark God had placed to say, "This story pauses here and then continues." "Do you want money?" Darius asked, the worst version of himself gathering like storm cloud ink. "Is that what this is? You want to humiliate me in front of partners, to raise your price?" Folake's head turned toward him with the slow deliberation of an executioner pivoting to a new instrument. "Be careful," she said softly. "Even thunder knows when to roll away." Rose's shoulders slumped, then set again. "I don't want money," she said. "I want honesty. I want to be able to tell my daughter that her father is not a shadow." She gestured toward the study where the squares still watched. "And if those people invest in you, I want them to know the man they are buying. Not the brochure. The man." Kenzo cleared his throat, the only sound he allowed himself. "We could step into the study," he suggested, not to hide, but to bring everyone into the same square of light. "If the call is on, let it be on for truth, not performance." "No," Amara said, the word surprising her with its steadiness. "We stay here." She looked from Rose to Ivy to Folake. "If you drag truth into another room, it puts on makeup and changes its voice." Folake's eyes warmed with approval she did not voice. She gestured with her hand. "Then we continue." Ivy had slipped her little hand into Amara's without asking, as children whose trust is a kind of prophecy will do. Her palm was damp and small and brave. Amara squeezed it. The contact broke something and mended something else. She crouched again, bringing her eyes level with Ivy's. "Do you like ice cream?" Amara asked softly. Ivy nodded, cautious. "Strawberry. And the one with little chocolates inside. Ms. Rose says too much cold makes cough." "Ms. Rose is right," Amara said. "If you sit with me a little, we'll see if there is tea. Or hot chocolate." She looked up at Folake. The older woman inclined her head and went to the kitchen island without fuss, already moving like a grandmother in a house she didn't own, but knew how to run. Darius took a step, as if to reclaim a scene escaping his choreography. "Enough," he said. "We will not—" A voice from the study cut through, amplified by the glass and the rain and the iron in it. "Mr. Cole," said the Southern woman who had spoken earlier, "this is Laverne Carter from the Foundation in Atlanta. Your mother's old pastor asked me to sit in because I've known you since you were a boy. You can end this call if you want, but if you do, we will end ours, with your project. If you leave it on, perhaps you'll learn something about building a house that does not leak." Darius looked like a man accompanied to a cliff and given options he did not like. He let his hand fall. "Leave it," he said tightly. Folake poured water into a kettle and spoke over her shoulder without turning. "We will have ground rules," she said. "No shouting, no lies, no pretending the child is not in the room. If you break any of these, I will break my silence with the people who sign more than you do." Darius's mouth twisted. He gave a short nod. Amara stood again, still holding Ivy's hand. "How long?" she asked Darius. "How long have you been a father to her?" He swallowed. The diamond on his watch flashed once, like a lighthouse beam on a dark thing. 7 years, he said. "Almost." "Almost," Rose corrected softly. "You missed the first month." "Where did you think he was going?" Folake asked Amara, not unkindly, but with the precision of a surgeon prodding for the source of a pain. "Work," Amara said. She hated how small the word sounded suddenly. "Deals, sights, flights." "And where did you feel he was going?" Folake pressed. Amara closed her eyes. She thought of the way fear disguises itself as hope, how hope wears fear's clothes to sneak past guards. She opened her eyes. "Away from me," she said, "even when he was next to me." Darius flinched. "You are not blameless, Amara," he said, grasping for a wire to pull himself back across the gap. "You have been difficult. You refuse to fit this life. You wear your hair." "My hair?" Amara laughed, and the sound startled even her. "My hair is your complaint?" He opened his mouth and closed it. The wrong argument arriving to the wrong war. Kenzo watched them both like a man studying a machine he admired and feared. He took a breath. "We should talk about the audit," he said, voice careful. "Not to change the subject. Because it is the same subject." "What audit?" Amara asked, the word sharp. Kenzo slid the folder toward the table center. "We looked into payments tied to the land bid in Victoria Island," he said. "There are inconsistencies, shell companies, transfers that look like gratitude but read like bribes." He glanced at Darius. "You told me to ignore, sir." "I couldn't. We found signatures from a consultant that do not match, and we found one payment that went to a personal account, under a name that matches Miss Rose's mother." Rose startled. "What?" she whispered. "No, my mother—" Kenzo lifted a hand. "It is not accusing you," he said quickly. "I am saying someone used her name. They used her hospital bill as a story to move money. It's in the ledger." The room tilted again. The rain sounded like 1,000 feet running. Amara felt something inside her knit itself into a different shape. Humiliation and betrayal had been a curtain. Behind it, there had been worse. "Why use her name?" she asked. "To tie you to silence," Folake said, face like weathered wood. "If anyone ever squealed, they would say, 'Look, he gave money to the mother of his child and called it a bribe.' Perfect scandal, perfect shame, perfect cover." Rose pressed a palm to her mouth. "No," she said. "No, I didn't." She looked at Darius, eyes wild. "Did you do this?" He stared at the folder like it had crawled out of the floor. "I don't manage the accounts," he said. "I sign. I trust my team. If the pen writes a murder, the hand does not get acquitted because the brain was busy," Folaka murmured. She nodded at Kenzo. "Show." Kenzo opened the folder to a photocopy, a ledger entry, a wire receipt, names and numbers, a signature line that said Yinka Adewale. Under it, the name Teresa Mbakwe, Rose's mother, tied to an account. Amara reached for the paper and stopped her hand mid-air. She did not want to touch this ugliness. But she did anyway, because life after this would have to be a series of choices where she touched what she wanted to pretend was not there. "How much?" she asked. $500,000, Kenzo said softly. Even the rain paused to listen to that. Rose sagged into a chair like someone had quietly removed the bones that kept her standing. Ivy squeezed Amara's fingers, sensing panic without understanding currency. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. "No, sweetie," Amara said, and the endearment surprised everyone, even Darius. "We're in truth. Truth is loud, but it doesn't bite. It only tells." Samuel stood by the elevator, hat crushed between his hands, mouth working prayers that did not leave his lips. From the study, Laverne Carter's voice floated again. Less iron now, more balm. "Mr. Cole," she said, "we can help you fix a bad deal. We cannot help a bad man. Figure out which one you are before the last square signs off." Darius's face shifted through 3 masks before settling on the one he wore to funerals, respectful grief. He looked at Rose. "I didn't authorize that payment," he said. "I will fix it. I will clear your mother's name." Rose searched his face for a long second and found nothing she trusted. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand like a child who had run out of tissue and manners. "Clear your own," she said. "Leave my mother out of your laundry." Folake poured tea into a cup and passed it to Amara. "Drink," she said. "Your hands are cold." Amara wrapped her fingers around the heat. She realized she had not eaten since breakfast. She realized she did not want to now. Hunger felt like a clean space she could sit in until she knew what to fill it with. "I need to say something," she said, and the room oriented toward her, even the storm listening against the glass. She looked at Darius and did not look away. "You hurt me tonight. You have been hurting me slowly for months, maybe years. I told myself it was stress and culture, and the price of marrying a man with big dreams. I told myself to be small, so your dream could be big enough to hold us both. I am done shrinking." Darius took a step, his eyes flash-flooded with many things: pride, fear, the instinct to win, the habit of command. "Amara," she lifted her palm, "don't." It was not loud. It didn't need to be. She turned to Ivy and knelt again. "Do you know how to draw?" she asked. Ivy brightened, caught by the rope adults throw when cliffs look close. "Yes, I draw houses with flowers on the roof because Ms. Rose says plants need homes too." "Good," Amara said. "I want you to draw a door, a big one, and draw a key. And when you finish, you will hold your key and decide which doors in your life you open. Not your daddy, not me. You." Ivy nodded solemnly at the assignment's gravity. Rose let out a small laugh that was half sob. "Thank you," she whispered. Kenzo looked at Amara with something like awe. He had seen boardroom brilliance. He was watching a different kind. Folake set her cup down. "Now," she said, "we speak of what next." She turned to Darius. "You will call your lawyer, not to threaten, to confess. You will call your finance head, not to erase, to expose. You will call your mother, not to excuse, to ask what kind of man she raised, and how to correct him. She turned to Amara. You will decide if your house is a thing to rebuild or a thing to leave standing as a warning. You will not rush. You will not let shame be your compass. Darius's mouth thinned. You dictate my life, he said, dazed. Since when did... There are days a man writes his story, Folak said, unblinking. There are days his story writes him. Today is the second. She pointed at the ceiling dome. You turned on light in your house. You forgot to sweep. The elevator chimed again. Again, that ridiculous, cheerful bell. Everyone turned, muscles tight with new dread. The doors slid open to admit a woman dressed in a severe navy skirt suit. An ID badge clipped to her lapel. Her hair was cut close to her head, and her eyes were the unflinching gray of Lagos rain when it decides to fall for hours. Two men in plain clothes flanked her, one carrying a tablet. Mr. Cole, the woman said, voice all business, not unkind but far from friendly. I'm Inspector Adaize Okoye from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. She held up a wallet with her badge. We've had several tips tonight regarding irregular payments linked to your company and this address. She glanced at the study. Her mouth did not change, but her eyes took in the squares. It seems you are already occupied. Kenzo's pulse leaped visibly in his throat. Tips? He murmured, then looked at Folake. She did not blink. Darius straightened as if a judge had entered. You can't be here without a warrant, he said automatically. Adaize nodded. We have one. She passed a folded paper to him. Limited, for records, and we have questions. You can answer now or at our office. There are also concerns about a wire tied to a woman named Teresa Mbakwe. We'd prefer to resolve those concerns without unnecessary noise. Rose's hand flew to her mouth again. Ivy leaned into Amara's side. Folak's gaze cut to the inspector. We will cooperate, she said. No grandstanding. The child will not be frightened. It wasn't a request, not exactly. It was the sort of statement powerful women make to one another to mark a line neither intends to cross. Adaize's eyes softened for a fraction. Understood, she said. She looked at Amara. Mrs. Cole, I'm sorry for the intrusion. Amara nodded, the last fragile skin of her composure stretching thinner. She stood and smoothed her dress, though it didn't need smoothing. She realized the tea had gone cold in her hands without her drinking a sip. Darius looked at the warrant without seeing it. He looked at the girl in the yellow raincoat. He looked at the bowl of jollof that had become a witness. He looked at his wife, and, for the first time all evening, his face showed something that was not performance, terror, raw, and human. Amara, he said, her name a plea that finally admitted it did not own her. Please. She felt the pull of years, of vows made in good faith, of memories not soured by this rot. She felt the ache of love's ghost walking through rooms it used to own. She felt the eyes of strangers in the study, of a child at her hip, of a woman in hibiscus cloth, of an inspector with a job, of a matriarch with a ledger of her own. She felt all of it. She did not break. I will answer questions, she told Inspector Adaize, but not without counsel. She looked at Kenzo. Call Chika Onwudiwe. She's ours. Kenzo nodded and stepped away, already dialing. Folake's eyes warmed a degree. Good, she said. You remember your own phone book. Adaize gestured to one of her men, who began photographing documents on the sideboard with quiet efficiency. No one moved to stop him. Samuel cleared his throat for the first time since he had entered. Should I bring more tea? He asked. Because this is what good people do during storms, small kindnesses, steady as sandbags. Yes, Amara said softly. And if the pantry has biscuits, Bring the ones with the chocolate." Ivy grinned up at her, crisis briefly displaced by the prospect of sweet. Daisy glanced at the ceiling dome. "Is this recording?" she asked. "Yes," Folaka said. "Good," Daisy replied. "Then we won't have to argue about who said what." The study door slid open of its own accord, as if the house had decided it was time to stop pretending the other room was anything but an extension of this one. The screen flickered. The faces shifted. Laverne Carter leaned forward, hands steepled. A man in a red tie scribbled a note. A younger woman wiped her eyes. Somewhere, in another square, a pastor bowed his head, lips moving in prayer. Darius's phone vibrated insistently. Texts, missed calls, a world collecting what happens when you spit at love, and forget that houses now have eyes. He silenced it. He looked at the inspector. "I will come in the morning," he said, trying to arrange events like furniture. "You will come now," Daisy corrected, polite as a knife. "We won't keep you long, tonight. We will take only papers, but you will answer where you can." "The morning can have the rest," he swallowed. "I need to say goodbye to your wife," Folaka finished for him, very gentle, as if offering him back something he might yet choose not to drop. Darius turned to Amara. The boy she had met at a pitch event in a cheap tie flickered, then vanished under the man he had become. He opened his mouth and shut it, opened it again. "I am sorry," he said, and for the first time it was not a string of sounds, but a thing with weight. It landed on the floor between them like a dropped coin. Small, maybe, but real. Amara nodded, because nodding costs less than words. "Go," she said. "Do not lie. Answer. If there is a way back from this cliff, it is not by pretending it is a hill." He nodded. A man who had built skyscrapers in 3 cities, and now needed instruction on how to walk. Daisy signaled to her men. They waited by the elevator. Darius picked up his jacket with a dazed motion. He paused, eyes catching on the bowl. For 1 second, shame broke through his polish like grass through concrete. He reached for the napkin, slow, awkward, and wiped the red smear he had left on the table leg. It was a small movement, ridiculous against the size of the harm, but it was something like a human being trying to remember how to be one. He turned to go. "Daddy," Ivy said softly. He stopped. She held out the chocolate biscuit Samuel had produced like magic from a tin, broken in half. "For the road." His eyes filled. He took the half with fingers that trembled. "Thank you," he whispered. He stepped into the elevator with the inspector. The doors slid shut. The ring chimed once like a bell at the end of a lesson. The rain softened, almost tender now. Rose let out a long breath that seemed to have been waiting in her lungs for 6 years. "I didn't come here to ruin your life," she said to Amara. "I came to stop mine from being ruined." "I know," Amara said. She meant it. Kenzo returned. "Chika is on her way," he said. "She told you not to sign anything." He hesitated. "She also said she always believed you were the brains behind his earliest designs." He looked embarrassed by the compliment he was tasked to deliver. "She said you have a good eye for where walls should go." Amara nearly laughed in spite of everything. "I can still draw a clean line," she said. Folak walked to the window and watched the city like a shepherd counts sheep. "Tomorrow," she said, soft to the glass, firm to the room, "we will talk about land, but not with him alone. With you." She faced Amara, eyes alight. "What kind of homes would you build if the money listened to you?" Amara's answer rose from a place she had not visited in a long time. "Ones that don't leak," she said. "Ones with kitchens where no one spits. Ones with locks that belong to the women who cook. and the men who do not forget how to say please. Her throat thickened. Ones with ramps and playgrounds, and rooms for secrets that do not hurt children. Folakes smiled, small and fierce. Good, she said. Then, perhaps tonight is the day we started building. The elevator chimed again, a relentless metronome in this symphony of consequence. Everyone turned, reflex sharpened by the hours. The doors slid open to reveal a solitary figure, gray-haired, cane in hand, suit slightly too big, face roughened by a lifetime of harm and fix. He stepped out and blinked at the bright room as if he had walked into a church. "Papa," Amara whispered, the word breaking out of her like a bird freed from old hands. Her father, Chukwudi Okafor, fixer of radios, teller of parables, wearer of a smile that showed his life in gaps, lifted his cane and set it down with care. "My daughter," he said, voice cracking, eyes wet. "I told the concierge I am Amara's father. He said there is storm upstairs. I said okay. I brought my bucket." He held up an old plastic pail with a cartoon fish peeling at the side. And somewhere in the study, in a square on the screen, Laverne Carter began to laugh with relief, and then to cry. The room breathed. Then Papa's eyes fell on Ivy, small, yellow, comma-marked, and his smile softened into something like recognition. He took one more step, cane tapping, and asked in a trembling voice that made Rose grip the back of a chair, and made Folak's mouth press into a line, and made Amara's heart slam once, hard. "Amara, why does this child look exactly like your mother did when she was 6? For a long second, even the rain listened. Papa's cane made a soft tick on the marble as he stepped closer, his eyes skimming Ivy's face like a man reading a familiar handwriting he had not seen in decades. The little comma mark near the left eye, the tilt of the chin that came with stubborn kindness, the way the lower lashes were longer than the upper, as if God had made a small mistake and smiled and left it. Rose's hands tightened on the back of the chair until the wood creaked. "Sir?" she asked softly. Papa looked up at her. "What is your mother's name?" "Annie?" His voice had that Enugu warmth that makes questions feel like blankets. "Teresa," Rose said, swallowing. "Teresa Mbakwe." Papa blinked twice slow, and the years seemed to reorganize themselves behind his eyes. He lowered himself into a chair without waiting to be asked, because men who have carried their households on tired backs stop asking permission when the wind is loud. "Then I have met you before I met you," he murmured. He looked at Amara. "Your mother's sister." Amara's breath caught. "What?" "Your mother had a half-sister," Papa said, the word steady in spite of the tremble in his hands. "Before she married me. Same father, different mothers. When your grandfather died, there was quarrel over land and shame over choices. They sent the younger girl to a cousin in the next village. Your mother's mother." Here his voice softened on a woman's memory. "She could not keep the child. Life was heavier than her arms. Your mother told me once, a long time ago, that the girl's name was Teresa. She said, if God was kind, one day the road would curve them back together." He shook his head, a sad smile cutting lines that pain had not yet found. "We don't choose how roads curve, but sometimes they remember us." Everyone looked at Rose. "My mother," Rose whispered, as if the words might move and she didn't want to scare them, "was born in Udi. She never liked to talk about those days. I only know she left when she was small, and a cousin took her in and treated her like a servant until she ran to the city. She met my father later. We left for the States when I was 12. She kept one photograph of a girl with a ribbon. She said it was her sister, but she didn't know where she was. Her voice thinned. She kept it in the Bible with Psalm 23. Papa nodded, tears glittering in the edges of his tired eyes. Psalm for walking through valleys. She was always brave, that girl. He turned to Amara, and the look on his face was the kind fathers keep for when life hands their children a story too heavy to lift alone. Nwam, Rose is your cousin. This child is our blood. The sentence landed with a soft, seismic thud. It didn't shatter the room. It rearranged it. Kenzo's pen stopped scribbling. Folake, who had been still as a carved queen, let out a breath through her nose that sounded like release. Samuel murmured, "Chineke," under his breath, and crossed himself quick like a man who covers all spiritual bases when the ground moves. Amara looked at Ivy with new eyes and found, to her surprise, that her heart had shifted a little to make room for this different kind of truth. A child had walked out of rain wearing her family's face, and now what had been humiliation became something else too, an ache braided with recognition. The betrayal hadn't shrunk, but the story had grown wider. Darius was not in the room to hear the new map written. The EFCC had taken him, with careful firmness and the quiet authority of people who don't need to shout. The elevator doors had shut on his dazed apology, and the ring had chimed with a bright politeness that felt almost cruel. The apartment felt different without his gravity, lighter, and also scarred, like a field after soldiers leave. Amara took a breath and approached Rose, palms open. "Cousin," she said, and the word tasted both strange and right. Rose's face crumpled with relief and guilt. "I didn't know," Rose said. "If I had known—" "If you had known," Amara said, "it would not have made what he did less wrong." She didn't soften the sentence to spare either of them. Some things need the dignity of being named without ribbon. But it would have changed this moment, and moments matter. She squeezed Rose's hand. A pact for now. "We will call Mummy Teresa in the morning. We will put this family back together where we can." Rose nodded, tears running clean tracks on a face that had too many old ones. Folake stood and walked to Papa, bent, and took his hand like a daughter. "Sir," she said, "you have done a good thing coming with your bucket." She tilted her chin at the plastic pail with the peeling fish. "We will need many." Papa chuckled through wet eyes. "I brought the small one," he said, "but I have big stories." He tapped his temple. Buckets everywhere. From the study, the distant chorus of voices waited, patient as a congregation in a long service. Laverne Carter's square glowed steady. The man in the red tie was no longer frowning. He was listening the way a man does when he realizes the script he brought isn't the one being acted and decides to pay attention instead of talking. A younger woman with locks had pressed her palms to her cheeks and was shaking her head slowly in the rhythm of someone recognizing the shape of a familiar sin. Kenzo cleared his throat softly. "They're still on," he said. "They asked if Mrs. Cole, if Amara, would speak about housing. They've heard enough about scandal. They want to hear about solutions." Ms. Laverne said the same. Amara looked toward the glass. Her reflection looked back, tired. Upright, eyes wounded but awake. For months, maybe years, she had let her light dim so a man could look brighter beside her. She had made herself small on purpose, and then forgotten the purpose. Now strangers were asking her to speak, and the fear that had hung around her shoulders like a wet scarf slid a little. "I will," she said. Folake nodded once as if checking a box on a list she had been carrying since she walked in. "We present you," she said. "Not as apology, as asset." Kenzo adjusted the camera controls on his phone. It synced to the system like he had been born to make rooms see properly, and the glass door slid fully open so that the two spaces became one stage. The kettle clicked. The rain eased to a patter like fingers on a drum. Amara stepped into the doorway of the study without actually crossing into it, as if she understood instinctively how to keep the room's power in both spaces. "Good evening," she said, voice even. "My name is Amara Okafor Cole. I'm an architect." The word felt good in her mouth. She had not said it in a long time without a second sentence explaining why she wasn't practicing. "I designed my first kitchen on paper when I was 11 because our house flooded each rainy season and my mother's pots floated like boats." A soft ripple of chuckle moved across the squares. Amara continued, "You've just seen something ugly in my home. I can't change what you saw, but I can tell you what I build when I am allowed to draw lines." She spoke then, not to perform for Darius's investors, but to tell the truth that had been waiting in the back room of her life. She talked about courtyards that held rain and people, about shaded walkways in Lagos that kept market women from burning their feet at noon, about low-cost drainage grids that made flood a visitor and not a landlord, about kitchens designed so dignity did not depend on a man's mood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sell. She described like a woman reading a grocery list that fed a community. And as she spoke, something in the squares leaned forward, felt, took note. Amara didn't mention Darius. She didn't mention Spit. She didn't ask for pity. When she finished, she said only, "If you are going to build with money, make sure the money listens." Silence hung for a moment, full and sweet. Then Laverne's voice came soft and sure. "Mrs. Cole," she said, "if we continue with this partnership, and for the record, the if now sits on different conditions, I will insist our board hears again from you. And I will insist that any contract includes your oversight on design for livability. We do not invest in cement. We invest in home." There were murmurs of agreement from two other squares. One man with a Scottish lilt added, "Quite right." "Thank you," Amara said simply. "Send us a draft of what you spoke," Laverne said. "Not in corporate. In human." "I will," Amara replied. The call did not end in applause. Adults with money rarely clap at the right times, but it ended with that rare thing in rooms like this: respect. When the screen blinked back to the company logo, the apartment seemed to exhale. Samuel, who believed in marking transitions with food, reappeared with a small plate of suya he had clearly sweet-talked the night chef into handing over after hours. He set it down like a peace offering from Lagos itself. "Pepper small," he said apologetically, "but good." Ivy, now fully committed to the safety of Amara's side, reached for a stick and then looked up for permission with the kind of politeness that makes adults want to buy children small kingdoms. "One," Amara said. "Chew slow." "Chew slow," Ivy echoed seriously, like a vow. Inspector Adaize's team had finished photographing the sideboard documents. She approached gently. "Mrs. Cole," she said, "two things. First, your counsel is in the building." As if on cue, the elevator chimed, and a woman in a smart black suit, Chika Onwudiwe, stepped into view. Eyes quick and kind, but sharp enough to cut a bad paragraph out of a contract with a look. "Second," Adaize continued, "there's a development. It concerns you, but I need you to know I'm presenting it because procedure says so, not because I enjoy dragging more people into mud." Chika had already moved to Amara's side like a shield with legs. "Tell us," she said. Adaize held up a clear evidence sleeve, thin as a snakeskin. Inside was a photocopy of a lease agreement for a service apartment in Victoria Island. Amara's name was printed there as co-tenant. The signature below it curled in a way that could have passed at a glance on a tired day. Amara felt the ground tilt a degree. "That's not mine," she said. She did not play the "I don't recall" game men play. She looked. "I didn't sign that." "It is dated 3 months ago," Adiezi said. "The apartment sits in a building where shell companies connected to Mr. Cole's firm have routed payments. The lease has been used as evidence that you consented to receive certain benefits. In simple words, someone has tried to make you look complicit." Chica's mouth thinned. "We'll get a handwriting expert," she said. "We'll subpoena logs from the building and the bank." She touched Amara's elbow. "Don't panic. This is forgery, so amateur it offends me." Folake's eyes had gone granite. "Who benefits from tying her name to that?" she asked. Kenzo had already pulled up something on his tablet. He turned it so only the inner circle could see, a flow chart of accounts, names, arrows. One arrow was highlighted at the end, Yinka Adewale, the consultant whose signature the audit had flagged. Another arrow pointed toward the same building as the forged lease. "I'll say it now," Kenzo murmured, low. "Yinka runs what he calls discretion. He brags to juniors that he can make wives look like air and girlfriends like fog. He thinks he's clever. He's the kind of clever that gets people hurt." "We'll invite Mr. Adewale to tea with handcuffs," Adizi said calmly. "But before that, Mrs. Cole, I need to officially inform you that we will be taking a statement from you as a potential witness. And depending on what we find, there's a chance someone will try to name you a suspect before we clear your name. They will do it because your name is heavy enough to attract cameras." She looked apologetic and fierce at once. "I like things neat. Tonight is not neat." "Let them try," Chica said, voice mild, smile not. "They will regret learning how neat I like things." Papa, who had been watching the legal tennis with the friendly bafflement of a man who grew up fixing radios with steady hands and honest parts, tapped his cane. "We will bring more buckets," he declared. "If they bring mud, we will bring sand and make blocks." Rose gave a wet laugh in spite of herself. Ivy nodded solemnly, which is what children do when adults make metaphors that sound like games. Samuel, sensing the temperature in the room drop and rise and drop again, quietly refilled cups. Folake sent a message to someone with a few taps. Her face didn't change, but Amara felt that far away, in offices where lights burned too late, gears were turning because Folake had decided they must. Chica opened her file and began to ask Amara the kind of questions that steady a story. Where were you? Who did you see? What did you sign? What did you not sign? And a day's recorded answers with the careful patience of a woman who hates sloppy lines. Rose answered some things, too, her voice growing steadier as the telling itself rearranged her fear into a shape she could carry. They were still talking when the elevator chimed yet again, and the doors opened on the last person Amara wanted to see, and, perhaps, the first person she needed to. Darius's mother stepped out, rain glittering on the plastic scarf she had tied over her hair. Pastor's wife, choir leader. Woman who had hugged Amara at a Thanksgiving fundraiser and whispered, "He shines brighter because of you." Her face was washed clean of makeup by weather and worry, and her eyes Amara had always respected, were not accusatory. They were searching. "Amara," she said, voice soft, breathless. "I came as soon as I heard." She took 2 steps into the room and stopped, taking in the tea, the suya, the inspector, the lawyer. Folake like a lighthouse, Papa with his bucket, Rose in hibiscus, and the small girl with the comma at her eye holding a biscuit like a passport. Her gaze landed on Ivy and stayed. Something moved across her face. Recognition, shock. The grief of realizing your son is not the man you told yourself he was. She put a hand to her chest as if to keep it from falling. "Oh," she whispered. "Ngozi's child's child." She didn't look at Amara when she said it. She looked at the ceiling as if speaking to the old friend she had lost years ago. "My sister." Amara's heart staggered. "You knew?" she asked. Darius's mother lowered her hand, eyes returning to the living. "I knew of Teresa," she said softly. "Your mother told me long ago, when we were young, and our husbands had not yet learned how to carry their pride like a disease. We prayed that one day the family would find itself whole." She took a breath that steadied itself as it left her lungs. Then she looked at Amara with a clarity that did not blink. "I did not know my son would be the man to break it on his knee." She turned toward the study, toward the screen gone to logo, toward the ceiling where the little dome watched. Her voice sharpened by 1 degree, enough to cut, not to kill. "Where is he?" "With the EFCC," Adaeze said, answering. Darius's mother nodded slowly. "Good." She took 2 steps toward Amara and stopped within reach, but didn't reach. Because respectful women don't assume forgiveness is a thing you take from a shelf. "I will not ask you to cover his shame," she said. "I have covered too many men's shame in church with committees and casseroles. It doesn't make them better. It only makes rugs dirty. Whatever you decide for this marriage, decide it for your peace, not for our display." She turned to Rose and Ivy. A softness spilled into the lines of her mouth. "And you, my child," she told Ivy, "no matter what the adults do with their poor sense, you will not go hungry in this family. Not again." Ivy considered this with the seriousness of a person who values direct promises. "Do you also have biscuits?" she asked. A laugh fluttered around the room like a small bird finding perches. Samuel chuckled, Papa wheezed, even Inspector Adaeze's mouth gave up a small smile to the cause. Darius's mother nodded. "I have biscuits," she said gravely. "Always." The laughter blew some dust off the moment. Then Chica's phone buzzed with a text that pulled the air taut again. She glanced, and the lawyer's calm frayed at the edge. "What is it?" Amara asked. Chica looked up, taking her time, choosing her words like she chose precedence. "EFCC just found a safe deposit key in Darius's jacket," she said. "They rushed a team to the bank on Amadou Bello. The bank manager cooperated. In the box, they found multiple passports, 3 SIM cards, a ledger with initials that matched the shell companies." She paused, swallowing once. "And a United States marriage certificate dated 2 years ago. The groom's name is Darius Cole. The bride's name is Rose Mbakwe." The room froze so completely, the rain outside seemed to stop out of respect. Rose's mouth opened without sound. "No," she whispered, but the word had no place to land. "No." "He took me to a courthouse for a document for custody protection. He said it was for Ivy's travel when we visited his mother. He said it wasn't real." Her eyes searched the air for a different answer, and found none. "He said it wasn't real." Kenzo closed his eyes, jaw hard, as if ashamed of not being surprised. Darius's mother swayed. Samuel moved as if to catch her, and then remembered, "You do not lay hands on tornadoes." She steadied herself with a palm on the back of a chair, and looked at the ceiling like women look when they remind heaven that they are paying attention. "God," she said softly, in that old way that isn't a cliché, but a document. See your son? Chica exhaled slowly. It might be a sham, it might be fraud, it might be void under Nigerian law, but in the U.S., on paper, it exists. Adaizi nodded once. We will clarify with the consulate. Either way, it is a crime somewhere, and it complicates